We're here with Spencer MacCallum, author, entrepreneur, anthropologist from Chihuahua, Mexico. Spencer, you've written extensively about an idea that you call the entrepreneurial community. Could you tell me more about that?
Well, the theory of entrepreneurial communities is very interesting because it appears to open the way to the provision of common or community services through ordinary contractual relations in the marketplace. A movement of social evolution towards a contract and to use Marx's term, the withering away of the state because it would no longer have functions. It's an exciting idea. So to introduce the idea, if you're going to develop a community, you have a tract of land and you need to parcel it up you lay out streets and parks and you parcel it up for usable pieces. Now that can be done in either of two ways. You can sell off the pieces, then you have a subdivision, or you can keep the ground title all intact and the houses and improvements on the property can be owned in whatever way might seem convenient. But if the ground title is all kept together and the land is parceled up by a leasehold and can be long-term leases or what have you, then what this does is to create a concentrated entrepreneurial interest, a continuing interest in the success of the community as a place to live and come and work and so on. And to the extent that this environment can be made attractive to people and useful to people, then the land value increases as people come in and now you have a business of a selling environment, attractive, optimal environment, human environment. The public services being provided contractually entirely. So you have a business, instead of selling off the pieces, which it has been the traditional way of doing it in the United States, almost without exception. By selling off the pieces, the developer gets his money back quickly and then he leaves to another project, but leaving the occupants to fend for themselves, to try to provide services and to maintain the value of their separate properties. And so they're inexperienced at this, and their lives they have businesses to attend to and all. So they tend to form a political organization of some kind to finance through taxes and regulations and to enforce rules in order to trying to maintain the value of their properties. Whereas as a business, it has a long-term view rather than short-term. And you have now an organization experienced, equipped, working 24/7 to not only maintain the value, but to raise it, to optimize it in whatever way you can, indefinitely into the future. So it's a very different concept. Now, we have a lot of experience with this sort of thing, only developed in the last not even 2 centuries. The first, what you might call entrepreneurial community, was the hotel. The first modern hotel was begun, the Tremont House in Boston in the 1830s. This was the first one. Then after that developed apartment buildings, office buildings, industrial estates, industrial parks. Then in the 1940s began the first shopping centers, then called park and shops. And at the end of the World War II, I believe there were only a dozen in the United States. Today there are probably 70,000, something like that. And they have evolved in size and complexity to the malls that we know today. Some of the hotels today, well, I know of 2 hotels in Las Vegas, Nevada, that have populations, including service staff and visitors, well exceeding the population of the city of Boston at the time of the War of Independence. The trend of these rather specialized entrepreneurial communities, and they are communities. You look at a hotel, it has its streets and alleys, its corridors. The lobby is the city square and perhaps park. We have the palms and so on in the lobby. And you have the provision of utilities, and you have a security office there that works very nicely, very quietly. If you misbehave, you may find yourself very quietly outside the hotel. It has the transportation system, which happens to operate vertically instead of horizontally. It's, in every sense, it's a community. A bit specialized, more rapid turnover and so on than what we think of as communities. But each of these entrepreneurial communities, these types, the class is called multi-tenant income properties, developed as a business for income rather than for capital gain by selling off the pieces. So we have a lot of experience now. Well, not only the ones I mentioned, but we have professional parks of all kinds. We have medical parks, many such things. So there's a lot of empirical experience to study, to look at. And the trend of all of these is in the direction of a more complexity, larger size, moving in the direction of communities as we are accustomed to thinking of communities. So it's a fascinating subject to look at. There are a number of advantages of a community structured in this way. For one thing, we're living in an age of accelerating change. And this arrangement allows flexibility, a normal, organic kind of flexibility. As leases run out and come up for renewal, the plan, even the layout of the streets, can be gradually changed, adapted to different uses. And an example of the problem with a subdivision, just one example, is that of trailer parks in the United States. Trailer parks were, for the most part, leasehold, but there were those that were subdivisions. Then came along the larger trailers. Instead of single wide, became double wide and sometimes triple wide. And those parks that were subdivisions were unable to adapt the street layout, the lots, to accommodate the larger trailers. So these parks became little islands of blight in the cities where they were, whereas those that were leasehold were able to gradually adapt and change to new uses. So it's exciting in a number of ways. Also, if you look at from the point of view of the resident, if in the residential part, a young couple buying a house, it may be the largest investment they'll make in their lives. Well, and they're very concerned about maintaining the value of their investment. Well, the value of land, of a site, is dependent entirely on its surrounding land uses, its environment. As in a subdivision, you have all these separate owners. None of them have the time, experience, or ability to maintain an environment around them, around their property. But in a leasehold situation, you have a company, well-established, experienced, and with resources, working around the clock to maintain and improve the environment of the whole development, because that is their business. Now the residents can relax. They know that their home will be maintained as far as its value, the lot, and now they can enjoy their neighbors instead of wondering, are those neighbors going to do something that will impinge on the value of our property? There are many unhappy stories about the homeowners associations where people tend to want to kind of police their neighbors, and sometimes they almost spy on them. They actually will. But now they don't have to do that. They can relax, and you can develop real community among the people. And this will be promoted in many ways by the company operating the community. So that is basically the idea of the entrepreneurial community, and if it will develop and eventuate as it looks as if it might, who knows? But it gives us some optimism for the future.
Thank you, Spencer.